we have come in the past decade or so. So I actually spent Thanksgiving yesterday at old college friend's place in Long Island. And just as a small aside, as someone who's in the medical profession, just having 4 consecutive days off and spending that time with your family is a blessing in and of itself from Allah. Alhamdulillah. I think this is the first Thanksgiving I had off in the past 6 or 7 years. So to have time, to be able to spend that time with family is a blessing, and it's not to be taken lightly. No matter what your thoughts are about celebrating these holidays and pilgrims and Native Americans and what it may be, but spending time with family is a blessing, and it's not to be taken lightly. So just a quick aside. And so I was at this Thanksgiving dinner at a friend's place in Long Island who we went to college with. And as I was sitting and eating dinner in his living room, I realized that his living room, that same home, was where we held the inaugural fundraiser for the building we're all in today. So his home was the spot where we started fundraising for the new Islamic Center building. And so before we had his first fundraiser my freshman year, we all sat around and we brainstormed, what should we call this campaign, what should we call this fundraiser? And we ended up settling on Mission Masjid. That's what our term was. We didn't have a great idea of what it was going to be, what an amazing view it would have, the ablution stalls and the carpets, and how nice it would end up being. But we had an idea that we wanted a permanent institution for the Muslims on campus, as well as Manhattan at large. And so we sat around, we brainstormed, and Mission Masjid was the name that the campaign came about having. And the very first fundraiser was in his same home in Long Island in my freshman year. And it ended up becoming kind of an institution for us. So we would have 2 big events of the year. I know things have changed with regards to the cycle, but our year would start with Ramadan, and our first big event would be the Eid banquet. And then the second half of the year, we'd have a second large event, and that would always be the Mission Masjid fundraiser. And so we'd always have it in E&L or Rosenthal, but it was ingrained kind of in our identity as students. And so that drive, that hustle, that fundraising effort was kind of built into our experience. So my senior year, Khalid, mashallah, had already procured the initial aspect of the endowment for the Mission Masjid fundraising effort. But we still continued to have the fundraiser, even though he procured that first portion of the endowment, because it was just so ingrained in us. And I think that ambition, that drive is built into the DNA of this very institution, alhamdulillah. One of those Mission Masjid fundraisers we had, I remember it was in Rosenthal, and the speaker actually was Imran Khan, who ended up now becoming the Prime Minister of Pakistan. But he was our guest speaker at the time, and it was before his political career. And he was giving his usual speech. But when we told him what our fundraising goal was and how much we wanted to raise for Mission Masjid to build this gorgeous building, he actually laughed at us in front of the entire crowd. And he said, they're asking for a ridiculous astronomical amount. I'm not even going to say it. And he didn't mention to the crowd how much we'd asked him to say. So, alhamdulillah, maybe we should invite him back now. I'm sure he's busy and stuff. But it was a funny moment when we look back on it. But in the end, I think the roots of this fundraising, this drive, this ambition that makes some people laugh at us, I think this is ingrained in the heart of the IC and the NYU community, and it's really something that I think makes us special. So there's a second example of this determination when I was at NYU, and when I was there was a satellite prayer room actually. And this wasn't any MSA drama or people splitting up or differentiating themselves. Alhamdulillah, that was never a problem for us. But I'm not sure if it's still there, but it was in Boast, the library next door on the second floor. There was actually a musalla in the northeast corridor right next to the bathroom. And it was actually populated by mostly immigrant uncles. And they were all there in the library studying for their USMLE medical licensing exams. They were all physicians in their home countries, and they'd come here to the United States, and before they could begin practicing, they needed to pass these exams. And so I ended up taking these exams in my training in the past decade. And the first one's pretty important for your future, but the second ones you kind of take, and they're not as big a deal. But these uncles, they would sit there, they would spend months, if not years, studying for these exams, and they were just so dedicated. So we would come to the library worrying about our midterms or our finals, and they would be there early, way before we got in, and we would spend the entire day, and when we would leave, they would still be there long after we left. And they were so dedicated that they had their own little musalla in the second floor. And, I think it's easy and often kind of in vogue, to laugh at our elders and we've seen the Metro PCS commercials or Apu and the Simpsons and that type of thing. But their hard work was truly an inspiration. And the immigrant generation that's preceded us here is truly an example. They work hard, and it's not something to be made fun of. Their strive, the work ethic is actually unparalleled, I think. And so I think our elders deserve a place of esteem in our community that I think they might not quite have garnered to this time. To be honest, the very first dollars donated for the Mission Masjid fundraiser, this building that we all pray in and take advantage of now, was from those same aunties and uncles out in Long Island and that same generation. So it's not something we can take lightly. And especially here in the holidays when we're sitting at dining tables and sitting with our elders, and when often we might be too busy, I think it's important to learn from them. And I guarantee that the experiences of your grandparents are far more valuable for you to learn from than whatever influencer you're watching on Instagram as you scroll through your phone. But before I leave the topic of Thanksgiving, there was one more topic I wanted to address, and I think it's probably one that many of us found ourselves in, if not all of us, and that was the idea of overeating and being satiated at the end of a large Thanksgiving meal. Everyone talks about it. They talked about getting sleepy afterwards. But I think this is something that's particularly dangerous, even for the Muslim community, even more than we realize. Obesity is well known in the medical field. Everyone knows about the diabetes epidemic. Heart disease, peripheral vascular disease are all increasing at levels unparalleled to previously known rates. Even rates of cancer are getting higher, colon cancer, liver cancer, and this is directly attributable to increasing rates of obesity. But I think we forget, even though medically we know how dangerous it can be, how spiritually dangerous overeating and satiating yourself can be. So Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, wrote his famous treatise of the Ihya Ulumuddin, the revivification of the faith. And in this series, he has about 40 chapters, basically going over what he thinks is important in terms of reviving the faith and what is crucial to your deen. And one of the early chapters, one of the larger ones, is known as Kasr al-Shahwatain, or how to break the two desires. So he spends an entire chapter on how you can go about breaking carnal desires as well as the desire for food. If the brothers can please come up and make room for everyone else that will be coming. And so that's how important I think self-control, especially when it comes to food and eating and the appetites, is for us as a community. It's that same self-control that those uncles over in Bope's library showed when they were studying from night to day. And it's the same reason why we fast. We fast to increase our self-control. So it's easy to let loose in the holidays, Thanksgiving in particular, when it comes to eating. But not just medically, but spiritually, there are ramifications to letting loose of the desires and the appetites. I thought it was interesting this year, particularly the Mawlid of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I was just a couple days before Thanksgiving, and whatever your thoughts may be about celebrating or not celebrating the birth of the Prophet, we all love the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's indisputed. And one of the most profound expressions of the love of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is the Burda. It's the poem written by Imam Busiri in the 11th century. And it's often recited on that day, but a lot of places in the Muslim world, this is recited, in fact, even weekly, every Jumaah at some places. And it is a manifestation of our love for the Prophet. And so in it, there's 10 stanzas or 10 chapters, and 9 of them deal with our love for the Prophet, his life, his message, the revelation upon him. But the second stanza of those 10, 9 of them are related to the Prophet, and one of them is specifically dedicated just to breaking yourself from the sin of gluttony. And so there's this amazing line in there. وَنَشْقَ الطِّفْلِ إِن تُحْمِلْهُ شَبَّ عَلَى حُبِّ الرِّضَاعِ وَإِن تَقْتِمْهُ يَنْفَطِمِ. So it translates as, and yourself, your desire, and your nafs, yourself and desires are like a child, an infant that's about to be weaned from milk. If you keep on giving him milk and you keep on letting him drink milk, he'll grow older and he'll never be dissatisfied. But if you start weaning him at a young age, it will eventually stop. And so our desires are just the same. The more you feed him, the hungrier you get. You'll never be totally full. And I think it's this self-control, this discipline of our nafs is something we all can work on and develop, particularly in this time during the holidays. Not just for the physical reasons, as we mentioned, but the spiritual ones as well. And this isn't just a discussion about the physical manifestations about being overweight. You can be of normal weight and still deal with gluttony. Bulimia, I think, is a huge problem in the Muslim community that's often not mentioned. And they'll obviously be of normal weight, but they'll overeat and then vomit and induce themselves. So they'll be of normal weight, but still have issues with overeating and oversatiation. So these are, I think, important issues for us to discuss, to talk about as a community, and not just for the physical reasons I mentioned, but the spiritual ones as well. Now I'd like to transition from Thanksgiving to the day after Thanksgiving. Black Friday is today. We all know it's grown larger over the years. It's extended all the way up to Cyber Monday, and still started even before Thanksgiving now. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you not to shop, or that's not realistic. I'm not going to tell you to stop doing everything you do. But I think it is important for us to realize the implications of what this kind of immense shopping and this immense push at sales can have that we don't, it can have a broader impact that we don't realize. So in the Quran it says, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. So whosoever does an atom's weight of good will see it on the day, and whosoever does an atom's weight of evil shall see it. And so the translation of this line has actually changed over the years. The scholars initially used to translate it as the smallest possible thing, They used to call it a sesame seed, and then they call it a fleck of sand. And with time, as we found things that were smaller and smaller, like an atom, that's what they translated it as. That's how even the smallest little thing can change the scales on our day. And so I think when it comes to spending, it's incumbent upon us to be more conscientious of where these goods come from and the impact that they can have. When I was little, I'd go shopping. If I saw a tag and it said there was a soccer ball that said made in Pakistan, or a cotton shirt made in Egypt, or some other piece of clothing made in Bangladesh, I used to get proud. I was like, I'm going to buy this just because it says made in this country. It's a predominantly Muslim country, and I would buy it for that reason. And it was a sense of pride for me initially. But now, as we hear more and more reports of the economic as well as sexual, spiritual exploitation of the workers in these predominantly Muslim majority countries, I think it's important for us to think about the decisions we make with the clothes we wear and the products we buy. And I think it's the ultimate irony, unfortunately, that I went and I bought this shirt to wear to Jumaah here in the United States. And it may have been made by a poor laborer. The latest report came out of Indonesia. Poor laborers in Indonesia who are making this shirt and are under such time constraints and such economic restraints that they aren't allowed to take breaks even to pray their prayers, even to pray Jumaah. So it's ironic that I'm buying this shirt to wear to Jumaah here in the U.S., and these poor laborers, Indonesia was the latest mention, where they can't attend Jumaah so that I can wear the shirt. So it's ironic and it's sad at a certain effect. Now, again, I'm not saying stop buying all clothes, anything along those lines, but I think it is important to consider ethical fashion, conscientious shopping, just the same way as the halal movement has evolved over the years. And nowadays, halal isn't just the way we slaughter something, but it's also the way the animal was raised. It was raised in a humane fashion. It wasn't caged. It was grass-fed. Those decisions that go into halal, I think, can also be applied to our shopping. And even the smallest little bit of difference makes an impact on the day of judgment on the scales. So it's one more thing to consider, I think, on Black Friday. And not to share overly private conversation. I had dinner with Imam Khalid a couple weeks ago, and I asked him, how much has your job changed in the past decade since I was here? How much have things evolved for you? What do you like more? What do you like less? How as the community has evolved and grown much larger? And what he said was interesting, I thought. He said he thought the biggest change was his focus on humanitarian work. We've all seen and watched his trips to visit the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. And that aspect of his work is really appealed to him. And I think institutions really walk in the footsteps of their leaders. And I don't think it's a bad idea for the IC to have this identity and this focus on humanitarian work. I think is essential to our identity. So I know all of us don't have the capability to travel abroad once or twice a year and visit immigrant communities. But for example, on Thanksgiving, I don't think there's anything that's closer to the Sunnah of the Rasul than homeless feedings. That's directly from the Sunnah, I believe. And so that's something we can always be partaking in. And nothing else, even small things, because an Adam's weight of good is noted. And so on Black Friday, I think conscientious shopping, thinking of the implications of what you buy and where you buy it and where those effects may go is a good place where we can all start. And lastly, I think it would be remiss if we're talking and discussing disadvantaged communities in this time of Thanksgiving, if we didn't briefly mention the indigenous people and the Native Americans of this country. I grew up in Massachusetts. We are all a stone's throw away from Connecticut. We're all sitting here in Manhattan right now. If the brothers wouldn't mind moving up just to make room for the brothers when they come in. So we're here in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Manhattan. These aren't just arbitrary names. These aren't just places we go to, but they're vestiges of a culture. They're vestiges of a people, a community that existed in these lands that unfortunately has been almost entirely erased. And we mentioned the names, but we can't forget where they come from. So Massachusetts, what does that mean? It means the great hilly place in the language of the Algonquin Indians who used to live there. Connecticut, what does that mean? It means besides the long tidal river, again in the Algonquin language. Manhattan, we mentioned it several times a day. We live here, we work here, we pray here. What does Manhattan mean? It's the land of many hills, in the language of the Lenape Indians who used to live here centuries ago and have unfortunately been erased. So I think it's important in this time, in this time of the holidays, that we can't forget the indigenous peoples of this country and how much suffering that they've been through. But I don't want this khutbah to become too negative. And it is a time of holidays, it's a time of happiness, it's a time of family. And so what I'll end this khutbah with, I think, is just a reminder that history has a habit of repeating itself. It's easy to be sucked into the 24/7 news cycle and just get depressed. But this isn't the first time that we've had an administration that's openly antagonistic to the Muslim community. We had a tough time when I was graduating about 10 years ago as well. And at that time, I remember Imam Siraj, who was actually an alum of NYU, he would come and he would speak to us. And he would remind us that no matter how difficult things are, or they may seem for us at that time, we can't compare them to the struggles of the African Americans in the civil rights movements, what they had to go through. Or you think about the massacres we just discussed of the indigenous peoples of this country, the Native Americans. They've been through a lot, and I'm not minimizing what we're going through as a community, but we shouldn't despair. And compared to what others have gone through before us, there's a lot we need to get to before we can get to their level. Even the Sahaba, alayhi salam, they would be so hungry at times they would take stones, they would wrap them around their bellies, and they would tighten them because they were in so much hunger. Nowadays, if our Uber Eats takes more than 10 minutes to get there, we give them a bad review and we write a strongly worded email to someone. So, we're not quite there yet, and it's important for us not to despair with regards to the troubles of our community. Alhamdulillah, we're in a good spot, and there's always hope, and history repeats itself. 10 years ago, there was a lot of despair too in the Muslim community, and history repeats itself. You work hard, and you find yourself in, mashallah, beautiful buildings that have been built in that time, beautiful carpets, beautiful views. And so I think as a community, no matter how bad things may seem, there's always room to say alhamdulillah, and there's always benefit. So أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. If the brothers can please move up in this intermission between us. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد. So I'll end with one last story about the IC from my time as an undergrad. And it started at the beginning of when I was an undergrad, the school year started right at the same time as Ramadan. And I think there was a lot of blessing in that because as a community you came, as a student you came, you didn't know anyone. And you'd all of a sudden have these 30 days of iftars, and you'd get to know everyone, you'd be kind of ingrained in the community immediately. And so, mashallah, nowadays I'm sure with this community, it's when it comes to praying Tarawih prayers, it's like probably a well-oiled machine, probably so many hafaz, there's so many beautiful voices that there's too many to choose from. But back in my day, we were just getting started, and so there was only 2 or 3 students initially who decided to start the Tarawih prayers here at NYU, and made the goal of reading the Quran from start to finish during the course of the month. And interestingly enough, it wasn't just the MSA board. It wasn't the kids who, mashallah, was in the front row for Jumaah. It wasn't kids who you'd expect, but there was just 2 or 3 of them. And for whatever reason, they were really dedicated to this goal that they wanted, during the Tarawih prayers, to finish the entire Quran here at NYU. And so we didn't have great voices. We didn't have a lot memorized. We just open up the Mus'haf and start reading. And we take turns. And there was only 2 or 3 of us. Sometimes, we'd have to make sure we had a Jumaah, so we would call people. We'd have to make sure that we'd at least have 2 people show up for the day, because sometimes midterms would happen, and so there were even days I remember where one of us would go study for like 6 rak'ah, and then he would come and join the Jumaah, and the second person would go study for the remainder of the day. So it was a struggle for us. We weren't the well-oiled machine, mashallah, that they probably are now. And it was a ragtag bunch. But there was a certain barakah in it. Doing things yourself. I agree that there's nothing that compares to standing behind a beautiful reciter and hearing their voice as you listen to the Quran. Nothing compares to that. But there's something to be said for doing things yourself, and that is kind of what this community was founded on. So one year I remember, actually, we miscalculated. So, the whole thing where the juz starts at 1 rather than 0, and so for whatever reason we were doing our calculations. On the last night, we ended up having like 4 or 5 juz we just had to finish. I don't know what happened, we miscalculated. And so we stood there, there was 3 or 4 of us, but we wanted to finish, and we stood there till the early hours of the morning, taking turns till we finished each one of those 4 or 5 juz. And I think that dedication, they closed down the Thompson Center. We had to go to that satellite center I mentioned in Bope, on the second floor, because it opened 24/7. And we finished praying, and we finished the Quran here. And that's, set the precedent for now, this beautiful community and everything that is accomplished. So I think there's something to be said about where this community started from. And those 2 or 3 kids that I talked about, those friendships have lasted decades. We're still friends, and that friend came and visited me last week, and we still keep in touch. And I think that is what really makes the IC beautiful community. That's what sets us apart. Literally, this building stands on the same foundation that the basement of the Thompson Center when I was 10 years ago. It's the same exact foundation. And I think it's the same foundation both literally as well as spiritually, in that community, that openness to invite anyone who is interested to come and pray with us, to join our community. That is what makes this place special. And that's something that I've realized over the years is something that sets us apart. So I'd like to finish the khutbah by making dua, asking for blessings for everyone in this community. Everyone who wishes to join is welcome. And we make dua and we make blessings for everyone in the community. We ask for blessings for everyone in this community. We make dua and we ask for blessings for the foundations of the community, that the pillars remain strong. We make dua and we ask for blessings upon Sheikh Sohaib, Sheikh Fayaz, Imam Khalid. The sacrifices of the leaders of our community are untold. And we make dua for them, and not just them, but their families, because they make untold sacrifices, and they're often underappreciated. As well, we make dua and we ask for blessings for the administration of the IC. There's a lot of people behind the staff, I know, that go underappreciated. And without them, we don't get to pray Jumaah, we don't get to pray, and all these wonderful things that happen. So we make extra dua and ask for blessings upon all of them, and everyone who's instrumental in having the IC run smoothly. We make dua for each and every member of this community, those that show up to every single prayer and those that only show up every 10 years or so. Everyone is welcome. We make dua for all of them, that Allah guides them and forgives them. We make dua in particular for our parents, our respected elders, that we learn from them, that we get guidance from them. We follow in their footsteps and in the footsteps of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We make dua for blessed offspring, blessed progeny who follow in the footsteps of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Sahaba. We make dua and we ask for mercy on our community and all those who preceded us, those including the indigenous peoples of this country, as well as the Sahaba, the pious predecessors, the companions, and the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We make dua, we ask for forgiveness, and we ask for shifa and intercession. ربنا لا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب القبر وقنا عذاب الحشر وقنا عذاب الميزان. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عدد خلقك ومداد كلماتك وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين وقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر.
الله
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
آمين.
قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى الله سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
آمين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله A couple announcements before I bring praise to Sunnah. Two requests for dua, one from an anonymous community member. He asked for dua for Jumaah today. He's currently in Mecca, went to the cave of Hira with a few friends during Tahajjud last night. When he was at the top of the mountain, it started raining and lightning and became violent. Alhamdulillah, him and his cousin made it down, but several people in the group were severely injured from the rain and lightning and rock slides on the way down from the cave of Hira. So any dua
du'as for this community and this holy space would be much appreciated. Secondly, a community member asked for dua for a fiance who recently had surgery and is now apparently having post-procedural symptoms of a heart attack. So may dua for his complete shifa. Again, the Islamic Center is run completely on donations. Donate whatever you can, and inshallah, Allah reward you for your hard work. We will be having awesome prayers when the time comes in.